What is it about ourselves that we fear the most? Is it our weaknesses, our shortcomings, our potential for failure? Or perhaps, more surprisingly, is it our own capacity for greatness? This question haunted one of history's most profound psychological thinkers, Carl Jung, who spent decades exploring the hidden geography of the human mind and returned with warnings that feel more relevant today than ever before. Picture this. A man sits alone in a dimly lit room, surrounded by ancient texts and the scattered pages of his own writings. Outside, Europe is being consumed by the flames of fascism. World War looms on the horizon. Yet this man, this psychiatrist from Switzerland, is convinced that the greatest danger facing humanity isn't political or economic. It's psychological. It's our fundamental misunderstanding of ourselves. Until you make the unconscious conscious, Jung wrote, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This single insight contains both a warning and a promise, a paradox that defines the human experience more than we might realize. Jung observed something peculiar about modern individuals. The more sophisticated our external world became, the more disconnected we grew from our internal one. The more we conquered nature, the more we feared the nature within ourselves. The more we embraced rationality, the more we suppressed the irrational parts of our being. And this suppression, Jung warned, was creating a dangerous imbalance in the human psyche. But who was Carl Jung, really? And why should his insights matter to us now, living in a world of social media feeds, constant distraction, and increasingly polarized societies? Born in 1875 in Switzerland, Jung began as a close colleague of Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis. But where Freud saw human motivations primarily through the lens of sexual repression, Jung's vision was more expansive. He saw humans as spiritual beings driven by more than just base instincts, driven by meaning, by archetypes, by the desire for wholeness. Their intellectual split was perhaps inevitable. In 1913, after years of growing tension, Jung broke with Freud and embarked on what he would later call his confrontation with the unconscious, a period of intense psychological exploration that many would have labeled a breakdown, but which Jung understood as a breakthrough. During this time, he developed the foundations of analytical psychology and concepts that would reshape our understanding of the human mind. I am not what happened to me, Jung wrote. I am what I choose to become. This statement wasn't merely optimistic rhetoric. It was a profound recognition of human potential and of the barriers we erect to block that potential. The central paradox Jung identified was this: we are simultaneously drawn to and terrified of our true selves. We long for authenticity, yet flee from it. We desire wholeness, but cling to fragmentation. We sense our potential for growth, but remain comfortable in stagnation. And most paradoxically, we fear both our darkness and our light. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, Jung observed, to avoid facing their own souls. Look around today, and you might wonder if Jung wasn't understating the case. We live in an age of unprecedented distraction. Endless scrolling, binge-watching, constant consumption. We have created technologies that promise connection, but often deliver isolation. We have built systems that commodify our attention while simultaneously fragmenting it. But what exactly are we avoiding? What is this soul that we so desperately try not to face? For Jung, the soul wasn't some mystical entity separate from our being. It was the totality of who we are, including the parts we'd rather not acknowledge. He called this disowned part of ourselves the shadow. Everyone carries a shadow, Jung wrote, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. The shadow contains all that we deem unacceptable about ourselves: our anger, our selfishness, our capacity for cruelty, our primitive instincts. These qualities don't disappear when we disown them. They simply go underground, emerging in distorted ways we can't control. Consider Alex, a 34-year-old marketing executive who prides himself on being rational, professional, and always in control. He has built his identity around being the calm, reasonable voice in the room, but every few months he explodes in disproportionate rage over minor inconveniences, screaming at customer service representatives, punching walls, saying things he immediately regrets. These episodes mystify and shame him. That's not the real me, he tells himself, but Jung would disagree. These eruptions are precisely the real Alex trying to be acknowledged, the disowned parts of himself demanding recognition. The more vehemently Alex denies his anger, the more powerfully it controls him from the shadows. This pattern doesn't just apply to individuals. It scales to entire societies. Jung lived through the rise of Nazism and witnessed firsthand how an entire culture's disowned shadow could manifest as collective madness. He warned that the more civilized we consider ourselves, the more barbaric our shadow becomes when it finally breaks through our defenses. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all his projections, Jung wrote, then you get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow. This brave individual realizes that the qualities they hate in others are often the very qualities they've refused to acknowledge in themselves. The political opponent isn't just wrong, they embody traits we've disowned. The difficult colleague isn't just annoying, they trigger recognition of our own disavowed tendencies. But here's where Jung's insight becomes truly revolutionary. The shadow isn't only filled with darkness. We also banish our light to the shadow. The most terrifying thing, Jung observed, is to accept oneself completely. Why terrifying? Because accepting our wholeness means acknowledging not just our capacity for pettiness and destruction, but also our capacity for greatness. Marianne, a talented writer, has been working on her novel for 7 years. Whenever she gets close to finishing it, she finds reasons to revise, research more, or start over. Her friends and family encourage her, telling her she has remarkable talent, but something keeps her from completing her work. What Marianne doesn't realize is that she fears not just failure, but success. To fully own her gifts would mean stepping into a larger life, one with greater responsibility, visibility, and the burden of continued creation. Jung called this the fear of the sublime, our paradoxical terror of our own potential. We don't just fear being inadequate, we fear being powerful beyond measure. As Marianne Nelson famously put it, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. This fear makes a certain kind of sense. To acknowledge our full potential is to lose all excuses. It's to recognize that what stands between us and a more meaningful existence isn't circumstance, but choice. It's to accept the burden of our own freedom. The privilege of a lifetime, Jung wrote, is to become who you truly are. But this privilege comes with a price, the dissolution of the false self we've constructed to navigate the world safely. The mask we've worn so long, we've forgotten it's not our face. So how do we begin this journey toward wholeness? How do we face the paradox of fearing yet needing our true self? Jung proposed a process he called individuation, the lifelong journey of integrating the unconscious aspects of the psyche with the conscious self. This doesn't happen all at once in some dramatic revelation. It's a gradual process of acknowledgement, acceptance, and integration. The first step is recognizing the shadow exists, not as some abstract concept, but as a living reality within us. The parts of ourselves we've labeled unacceptable didn't disappear. They went underground where they gained power through our denial. James at Dates, a dedicated environmental activist, finds himself inexplicably drawn to videos of gas-guzzling muscle cars. He feels guilty about this fascination, seeing it as contradictory to his values. But in acknowledging this interest rather than suppressing it, he begins to understand a part of himself that values power, freedom, and even a certain rebellious rejection of constraints. By integrating these values consciously, he can actually become a more effective advocate for the environment, one who understands the psychological appeal of what he's fighting against. The second step in Jung's process is to engage with the shadow through active imagination, dreams, and creative expression. Jung himself filled journals with his dreams and visions, creating elaborate illustrations that gave form to his unconscious. Art, writing, even honest conversation can serve as bridges to these disowned aspects of ourselves. But perhaps the most challenging aspect of individuation is facing what Jung called our golden shadow, the disowned excellence within us. In all chaos there is a cosmos, Jung wrote. In all disorder, a secret order. Our greatness doesn't come from eliminating our flaws, but from integrating them into a larger wholeness. Consider the case of Michael, a corporate lawyer who secretly dreams of becoming a woodworker. He dismisses this as a frivolous fantasy incompatible with his real life. But when he finally allows himself to pursue this interest, he discovers that the patience, precision, and problem-solving skills he's developed as a lawyer transfer perfectly to woodworking. Meanwhile, the creativity and tactile satisfaction he finds in woodworking begin to inform his legal practice, making him more innovative and fulfilled in his primary career. This is the alchemy Jung described. The transformation that occurs when we stop fighting ourselves and start integrating our seemingly contradictory aspects. Of course, this journey isn't easy. There's a reason we've built such elaborate defenses against self-knowledge. There's no coming to consciousness without pain, Jung acknowledged. Facing our shadow means confronting shame, regret, and the uncomfortable recognition of our own complexity. It means giving up the comfort of seeing ourselves as simply good or simply victims of circumstance. But the alternative is far more painful. A life half-lived, potential unrealized, and the constant drain of energy required to keep parts of ourselves locked in the basement of consciousness. As far as we can discern, Jung wrote, the sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being. This kindling requires the courage to face the paradox at the heart of our nature, that we are simultaneously more flawed and more magnificent than we allow ourselves to believe. The world Jung witnessed was tearing itself apart largely because humans couldn't bear to face their own internal contradictions. Instead, they projected them outward, creating convenient enemies and simplistic narratives. Is our world so different today? We live in an age of unprecedented external connection yet profound internal disconnection. We consume more information than any humans in history, yet seem increasingly confused about fundamental truths. We claim to value authenticity, yet curate idealized versions of ourselves for public consumption. We've never had more freedom to become ourselves, yet anxiety, depression, and the sense of living inauthentic lives plague millions. Jung's warning to the world wasn't just about the danger of repressing our darkness, it was about the necessity of embracing our wholeness. Darkness and light, weakness and strength, limitation and transcendence. The world will ask you who you are, Jung observed, and if you don't know, the world will tell you. In a culture that profits from self-doubt and offers endless identities for consumption, Jung's call to discover our true nature becomes not just psychologically sound, but revolutionary. This revolution begins small, with one person willing to look honestly at their own contradictions. With one conversation where we admit our uncertainties instead of doubling down on our certainties. With one creative expression that comes from the authentic self rather than the curated persona. I am not what happened to me, Jung reminded us. I am what I choose to become. This choice isn't made once, but continuously. In each moment, we choose awareness over avoidance, integration over fragmentation, growth over comfort. The paradox remains. We fear our true self, yet can only find peace by embracing it. We run from our wholeness, yet long for it simultaneously. We sense our potential greatness and shrink from it in the same breath. But perhaps in acknowledging this paradox, in seeing it clearly rather than trying to resolve it, we find a way forward. Perhaps the journey toward wholeness isn't about eliminating contradiction, but about developing the capacity to hold contradiction without being torn apart by it. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. This choice isn't made once, but continuously. In each moment, we choose awareness over avoidance, integration over fragmentation, growth over comfort. What Jung understood, perhaps better than anyone before him, was that our fear of ourselves is both natural and surmountable. The path to overcoming it isn't through more self-improvement projects or achieving some idealized state of perfection. It's through radical acceptance of our authentic nature, the good, the bad, the beautiful, the terrible, the ordinary, and the sublime. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, Jung wrote, but by integration of the contraries. In a world that constantly encourages us to optimize, streamline, and perfect ourselves, this message is more countercultural than ever. It suggests that our salvation lies not in becoming better versions of ourselves, but in becoming more complete versions that have room for all of who we are. The journey Jung invites us to undertake isn't easy. It requires courage, humility, and persistence. It demands that we question our most fundamental assumptions about who we are and what we're capable of becoming. It asks us to embrace uncertainty and complexity in an age that markets simple answers and quick fixes. But the reward is nothing less than freedom. Not the shallow freedom of doing whatever we want, but the profound freedom of becoming who we truly are. Not the illusory safety of the false self, but the authentic security of the integrated self. The shoe that fits one person pinches another, Jung wrote. There is no recipe for living that suits all cases. The path to wholeness isn't standardized or prescriptive. It's as unique as each individual undertaking it. But it begins with the same courageous step for everyone. The willingness to look honestly at ourselves, to face the paradox of fearing yet needing our true nature. In the end, perhaps the most profound aspect of Jung's warning is that it contains within it an invitation to a more authentic, more meaningful way of being, an invitation to stop running from ourselves and start embracing the magnificent contradiction that is human existence, an invitation to kindle that light in the darkness of mere being, not by becoming someone else, but by becoming more fully who we already are. Your vision will become clear, Jung promised, only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. In a world that seems increasingly dreamlike, increasingly disconnected from reality, this awakening might be not just personally transformative, but culturally essential. Jung's warning is also his gift. The recognition that what we most fear in ourselves might be precisely what we most need to save ourselves, and perhaps to save our world.